Well, good morning. It is Thursday, May 14th. I am Heather E. Clausen, the pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church and the United Methodist Church, both in Herman, Minnesota. In a few minutes, I'm going to be reading from, in the New Testament, the book of Colossians, chapter 3, beginning at verse 15. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about this letter to this church in Colossae, to this community begun by Epaphras. Like many of the other letters that we have been given, of probably the many, many more that were passed around in those early days of the gatherings of believers, one of the primary questions that often comes up is, as people were blended in that time from different faiths, Jew and Gentile, others for whom this was all new, completely new, there were many questions about what was necessary to be in this relationship, to receive this salvation for Jesus. And many of the concerns that were happening, the conflicts that were happening, the disagreements were about what rituals, what practices, what more do I need to do to be sure. And over again in these letters, there is the reassurance that all that Jesus has done is sufficient. But that really is not the focus of many of these letters. They claim that fact, state that fact that is true, that there aren't things that we can do to earn that, there aren't certain practices we need to do to be in right relationship with God through Jesus. But the focus is really on community. And what does that look like? The focus is on the witness that we give through how we live. And in this church in Colossae, in this chapter 3, in this book we call Colossians, that is the total focus. What does it mean to walk away from the old orders? What does it mean to walk away from the old ways of being? What does it mean to be in a unique, a new type of relationship with one another? And what are the ways in which people then and people today can live in this new realized community, this community that is to be different, that is to be based on love and forgiveness and mercy and compassion? It was the questions they were answering then, and it is the question we're answering today. And I think in this time of COVID-19, we're discovering that it's a lot different than what we thought. It isn't just being a Christian who gathers in a building. It is being a different sort of community that is fully engaged with the cares and concerns and needs of all the world around them. So let me share these verses. I'll be reading from the New Revised Standard Version, chapter 3 in Colossians, beginning at verse 15. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another in all wisdom, and with gratitude in your hearts. Sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. If you paid attention, there were some important words in there that were the theme, and the theme for this morning. Giving thanks. Being in an attitude of gratitude. Giving thanks. You know, it's interesting when you talk to mental health people that often one of the first recommendations that they give to someone who is struggling beyond what they need to do medically, but the ways in which they can bring a little healing and wholeness to their lives, is the same recommendations we are given and many of the religious traditions throughout the world. And that is, what are you grateful for? What can you give thanks for? And often the recommendation is begin your day that way, before your feet even hit the floor. For what are you grateful? And at night, sometimes we find our brains swirling with things that hold our attention that are often the negatives. Oh, I should have done this, or I didn't do this, or I'm concerned about this, or I wonder about this. And once again, their recommendation and the recommendation of our faith is to end your day with the same thing. What am I grateful for today, this moment, this hour? And give thanks for that. You know, when this pandemic began, and I know I'm not the only one, it was overwhelming. It was felt as if we were constantly in crisis management. And it also brought us to many of us working from home. And we come to find out that it becomes very blurred, that boundary between our working life and our home life. It becomes so blurred. I know I found that it seemed like, man, sometimes still does, that every waking moment was work. The issues were new and hard. They raised up for us concern about family, concern about neighbors. They, for me, brought an awareness that the times were changing. How could we continue to be connected? How could we continue to do, as they say, church, but in a virtual world? And that began to add to that list. What do we have to have in place when we are allowed to return? How can we continue this virtual presence? How can we find ways to move into this new world of doing church? And it becomes overwhelming and exhausting. It feels like you're always on. The one way to flip that switch, besides setting up some new boundaries and barriers of what's work and what isn't, try to tell that to your mind sometimes. But it is gratitude. This morning I shared on both church Facebook pages the words of Bishop Stephen Charleston again. Because that's what he was doing. He was gratitude this morning. He wasn't bemoaning anything, even though there is a lot to be concerned about. But he was just saying thanks. And it can be as simple as saying thanks for the gift of life. It can be very specific for giving thanks for the people who are taking care of us. It can be giving thanks for all that is happening, that is demonstrating the beloved community, the ways in which we care for one another. Oh, it depends on the day. Their days are still a mix of joy and frustration. And I find for myself, and I'm hoping for you, that when I turn that dial a little differently and I begin to focus on a little gratitude, on a little saying thanks for the simple things that I am healthy. Right now, my family is healthy. Right now, there are many who are working, probably day and night, to find the best ways to keep us safe while at the same time beginning this process of restoring some jobs, some work hours. Thinking about saying thanks for family meals together that often were neglected because of a meeting. Saying thanks for my colleagues. Maybe I can only meet them right now by Zoom or Blue Jean or whatever the current app is that's in place that I'm using. But it's so good to see their faces, and it's so good to share things. And I think we need to do that. It doesn't take away the pain and disruption, the confusion, many of the uncertainties that still dog us. But it is another way for a reset. To shut down a little bit of that spinning self-head talk. To begin, as the old hymn says, and as my grandmother always said, count your blessings. It doesn't take away all that is of serious concern. But we need some moments where that isn't our focus, so that we and our spirit can be armed again to do what we need to do, to pay attention to all the need that needs to be met. We need, just as Paul said, as this letter says with Timothy and Paul, we need to remember gratitude. It is a fiber that we need in our very being, in our very spirit. It is a part of being the beloved community. And as the mental health experts say, it is a part of helping us hold together in difficult times. So it is my prayer this morning that you will find moments to have an attitude of gratitude. What are you thankful for? What are the blessings you can claim and thank God? When that is a part of our practice, when that is a part of who we are, it is amazing the healing that God can bring in our spirit, so that once again we can get up again and we can deal with the uncertainties, the frustrations, the new type of work we're having to do, the new future we need to imagine and plan into. But we need those moments. Take a break. Make your list. And give thanks. Amen.